shows you what I mean when I say the master controls the 7 chakras. You see how the third present rises above the 7 chakras. And what are the 7 chakras? They are balanced dimensions, right? Dimensions that you were able to step above and balance them. But you also need to realize that even though you move up, you can drop back down. Anybody can drop back down. A master can drop back down. So as you move up, it takes work, not only to keep moving up, but to stay up, right? And if you move up too suddenly for what your system can take, you can be sick, seriously. But then that's fine. Concentrate on healing it and you'll be fine.
I sometimes equate that to the spiritual flow.
So in this drawing, in the second presence, the second area is balanced then, and it's just the fourth and the sixth that have well, you need to balance. And then in the third presence, all 7 chakras are balanced.
Yes.
Okay. And how would you describe a balanced second chakra?
So take a martial artist, right? They have trained and trained and trained. I'm talking esoteric martial arts, where you learn to drive your energy through the mind. And where the mind goes, chi goes. And they know how to take the force of the opponent and bounce it back to the opponent, right? That is an example of balancing the second chakra.
Okay.
I say it's an example visually, right? Because many of us balance the second chakra without being martial artists, right? But it's a visual representation of what happens.
It helps. That helps. Thank you.
And you know how they sometimes show how they can imagine the next move? If you see a movie about martial arts and they show them concentrating and visualizing what's coming, they are in second presence to be able to do that.
And then in the third presence, when the fourth chakra is balanced, is that when you're in unconditional love, no judgment?
Correct.
Okay. And then how would you describe when you reach the balance of the sixth?
That you control your brain. Your brain doesn't control you.
I'm not there yet. I'm way I've got a long way to go with that. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
So read the book, The Untethered Soul. Untethered Soul. I don't know why that book helped me awaken to what it takes to master your brain.
Okay.
Michael Singer.
Yeah. And it could have been, it could have that effect on me and not on others, but I felt constantly he's talking about the fire baptism all the way through. I felt it.
Great.
I see myself sometimes in, not maybe in total different presence, but depending on the people I'm with.
Yes, and that's the harmonics, right? Because these spheres operate on harmonics, you can influence where other people are at, or they can influence where you're at.
Right.
And the way I realized that in Switzerland, I had two friends and we'd go to lunch. We worked together and we'd go to lunch and talk about this concept. And one of them was very trained to rising to the fifth and being in that level. And the other one would do so out of nostalgia rather than, his own will. So we would set a date to meet for lunch the next time. And he would agree to it and all of that and then not show up. And we realized that he doesn't live in the fifth, he lives in the third. So we made that agreement when we were all talking at the fifth level. And when he dropped back to the third, he remembered nothing about it. So what does that say? That when you put people together, you can influence the level another person is at, even if that's not their natural level. During the dialogue, you hold them up there through harmonics, right?
Right.
And I played around with that in meetings at work. I would, if the meeting began to be very argumentative, I would go like, okay, try to tune what level it was at, and then move it up in myself, right? And the whole meeting would move up because the harmonics are in operation. And the opposite was happening when people made me drop, right? It's their harmonics. Some people have such strong third chakra or first chakra that they can come in and boom, pull you down.
Yep.
So here I talk a little bit deeper about what it takes to go through each of the baptism. So the earth one, which Christ took for us, we go through it just through Thanksgiving. So we can affect the same thing, which is what you were talking earlier about getting out of depression through gratitude, right? And the way I arrived to that was to understand the Christian mass and the sacrament of the Eucharist, which means thanksgiving in Greek. Eucharist means thanksgiving. So what is that doing? It's asking you to be thankful for the sacrifice of Christ, right? Don't go through the grief of it, right? Don't suffer with him. Be thankful he did that. And be thankful he's still in that sacrifice, because Christ has united himself with our planet Earth and its energy and our human energy till we all move up. And that's the sacrifice. That's huge. So the water baptism, if you can overcome desires or overcome the need to lie, which comes out of fear mostly, or desire for more power, either way, those are first chakra things, right? You need to really be master of your first chakra to rise through the second. And that's the water baptism. And you do that with the help of the fifth, or you it's not that you take the baptism and you're done. You need to do it again and again and again as different things come up in life that remind you still have that blind spot, you still have that weak spot. Work on it, right? And then the air baptism is, a lot of people talk about that as giving up the ego. That was actually a very strong way of talking in the last couple of decades, that you have to give up your ego. What you have to give up is your egotism, your attention to the personal, right? But if ego is what gives you identity, and in some languages that's what it is, ego in Greek is what we spell as I in English, right? That's your mask. That's your upright mask. That's what makes you individual to reach in your free will and in your to uprightness, right? Spinal uprightness. So and that means you let go and you rewrite code so you don't work on inherited cultural hatreds and premonitions, right? You open up to your ability to find what is true and authentic in yourself, and then through that deal with the cosmos. It's not easy. I mean, you see all the democratic motions to, not put people in prison and all of that stuff. It relates to that urge, but it's applied in a way that turns around and whacks you, right? So it's very hard to balance these things out between, what you're aiming for and what the result is. And then the fire baptism to me is the ability to revere. You need to revere everything around you in its divinity. And you do that by placing yourself in the service of your neighbor, of the other person. And that's the fire baptism, and that's what Christ asks of the apostles, to take the good news, the gospel, to the world so the world can awaken. And they will be prosecuted for doing that. And here I try to align it to some other notions. So at the very the image itself shows the leap that you do through an earth baptism. You go from sensual soul to intellectual soul. Through water baptism, you enter consciousness soul in first presence. Through air baptism, consciousness soul in second presence, and through fire baptism, consciousness soul in third presence. And how these, for the culture at large, these leaps align to the precession of the equinox from the age of Taurus through Aries, through Pisces, and we're now entering Aquarius. And then at the top, I align it more like, you're a believer when to me, believing is you believe to something external, you believe in it because you were told to. But what did I do? Did that move? Yeah. But you become faithful when you internalize it. You have faith in yourself, faith in your divinity. You don't go out there looking for a savior outside of you. And then you move to the night essence, which is the rider who is able not only to ride, but tame the horse he rides, right? And that's in the Masonic symbolism. And that's really rising into first presence, where you're no longer an animal, you're rising to be a human. And then the Mason is the one who builds the vessel of the soul. And that's the work of all of these. Everything we've talked about is, how do you build the vessel of your soul? So when you rise in the third presence as an arc mariner, you can navigate that vessel in the other realm, right? That's just, again, metaphors that help you move to a neutral image rather than a heaven and hell kind of image. Here again, I look at the baptism as trials that we take daily, and that's the exercise. It's not that you're baptized in a river or something. Each comes as a trial to us, and how we respond to that trial makes a difference in how we rise into our divinity. So the earth trial makes us recognize that we're not just physical, we're also divine. The water trial makes us realize that we are responsible and we must, to act in presence, you act responsibly. The air trial lets go what we no longer need. That's letting go the karma. Free yourself from karma and get out of that heart wall. And the fire trial allows us to be in community with what is divine around us. And I think that's why Christ says, he says, you cannot reach me on your own. You need to be in dialogue with your brother, right? You need to do that in community. So, and what we rewrite, number one, is that mortal fear, the forced obedience, and we build a code of inner faith in our divine essence, which is there as a little spark when we start and keeps growing. Because really, our objective is to turn wisdom into love, and love is the creative force in the universe. So our objective is to become co-creators in a divine sense. But we never dare think that way under the church, right? Which kind of separates us from the divine. And I think you reach points when you think, okay, I'm pretty well done with the earth trial, right? So if you totally believe in your divine essence and you're thankful to Christ for his sacrifice, or Buddha, or anybody you choose to be thankful to, I think you're pretty much done with the earth baptism, right? But you still have the other three happening. And then someday you will say, okay, I'm pretty much done with the water baptism. I have the other two going, and so on. It's not an overnight thing by any means. So here I describe an experience that made me realize that I need to dwell in the Christian a lot deeper than initially I was even planning to. And that is, I was raised Catholic in Greece, which means I was educated Orthodox, and most of the church attendance was in Orthodox church because there's very few Catholics in Greece. And the rest of my family was Orthodox. So if I wanted to participate in any ritual with them, it was the Orthodox church we went to. So when I was in Virginia Beach in the early 90s, we were visiting family and we all went to the Greek Orthodox Church. On Good Friday, at 7 p.m., they celebrate the Lamentations of Mary. And these are 30 chants that start in a very flat melody. And as you continue and you move up a chant and you move up a chant, it becomes more and more and more melodic. And the experience I had was that the music was rising through my spine. And I thought, that's weird. But I followed it, right? And then I realized that not only it was rising through my spine, when it got to the area of the head, we all left the church, we left the temple, lighting candles. And there's this parade that goes through the parish or the farm or the village, whatever it is the congregation represents. And it's like a snake of light, because by then it's dark. It's like 9 o'clock in the night. And you go around and around, and everybody has their candle, and they repeat the last melodic chants. So this is like the Kundalini that rises and leaves the temple, leaves the body through the head, right? And then on Easter, the midnight before Easter Sunday, everybody comes together again outside the church, and the priest brings the light that the church preserves year round, and they call it unbuilt light or sacred flame. I don't know, I'm sure there's many names for that, and lights everybody's candle all over again. And I thought, that's what made me think, okay, this is a representation of initiation, right? It's a 33-hour of death, near death, because all you are is your Kundalini outside your body, and then you light it in an enlightened way with an unbuilt light at the end. And so I began putting the two together and seeing more of what was it that was happening through initiation. So here I will show you the Polaroid that I was talking about earlier. If you take a Polaroid lens, so let's say you have 3 slots, right? And no Polaroid is there, or light comes through. So the cosmic light was perfectly available and visible to the atavistic soul at the time of the rishis, even at the time of the earlier Persian Empire. The people were part of the cosmos, like a horse is part of the cosmos, right? They don't ask themselves, should I be a dog? Should I be female instead of male? They're just part of what they are, and they're happy to be there, right? So that's like a paradisiac existence before you begin to put layers of guilt and dogma over it. So the second stage here is when you begin to insert a Polaroid filter in your second chakra. And that's when you enter the sensual soul. This is Rudolf Steiner terminology. So it's around 2000 BC, the same time as Moses. You're beginning to think in terms of good and evil, in terms of sin and not. So you've put the Polaroid, and only half of the light comes through, and it's in the second chakra. And then you enter the intellectual soul, either by becoming an initiate or through the gift of Christ, where you have the ability to reach your brain. And that's, where the sensual was front and back. This is right and left. And when you do that, when you have 2 Polaroids perpendicular to each other, no light goes through. So we become opaque beings who use science to overcome, right? And then in the next period, and that starts around 1400, we enter consciousness soul, which activates the fourth chakra. And remember, I told you that's diagonal. And as you move the diagonal, you reach a position whereby you allow all light to come through again. So you can do that experiment and play around with it with Polaroids. And I think it's very similar with what happens with our dual chakras, right? If we balance them out, the light will come through again. So I don't know if that helps or sounds weird, but to me, it was another aha. That's why we went through these different periods. And Steiner describes them at length of how they differ.
Well, it's interesting that the European history called the Dark Ages was between the 5th and 14th centuries. So it's also during the time where there was no light. I don't know if that's a correlation I should be making, but
yeah, I mean, Steiner assigns that era, right? So obviously, how does he do it? He looks at the different phases and says, okay, that's what that is. Another way of looking at it, and he has a lecture devoted to that, is how if you look at the four corners of religion, nature, science, and art, how the interplay between them changes as you move from sentient to consciousness, and how in the time of sentient, religion, right, you can find it in nature, and it is science, and that will end up in art, but it's nature that harbors the divine, right? You find the divine in nature. And then when you come to the intellectual soul, you find the divine in art, and art becomes the major. And now we seek for the divine in science, right? So it has moved as you move from one kind of soul to the next. I don't know, this is just an example, so it's good to think about these from different perspectives, again, because it takes you out of your drama and into the essence of what it is you're studying. And here I have another picture, and I play around with this. If you think of this picture, each section of the middle image of the grail is done by putting two sections of a cycle together in different ways, right? So the body part, which is just physical, all our attention is on the external, right? So it's the leg of the grail. And the center part, the vesica piscis, is where all the attention is on the internal. And this is where the sun and moon of our nature come together. And then the upper part, all the attention is on spirit, right? That's the cup that hosts the spirit. And, you know, David Hawkins, that I was talking about earlier, he was asked, okay, what is the Holy Spirit? He says it is the bridge between the one and the all, or the bridge between the physical and the cosmic. So the soul hosts it is that bridge, right? Of between the one and the all. The soul is the Holy Spirit. And when we cross ourselves, we show it on the fourth chakra. And the spirit is what hosts the Father, right? The cup at the top hosts the pure spirit. and the body is where you incarnate to have the external experience and learn how to be a creator yourself. So I don't know if that picture helps. It's more, again, I play with different levels of symbolism just to bring the concept to life. So, and the Grail, the only thing I understand about the Grail is that you need to ask the question, what is the Grail and whom does it serve, right? The rest of the myth makes no sense to me. But if you think about eroticism, it is driven by passion, right? You ask a question you're passionate to know. And that's what the word means in Greek. And if you think of a panthesis, which means the answer, is that apan means the all, right? So your answer is always sourced from the all, from the cosmic. So again, this aligns to first presence, second presence, and third presence, right? But all together they make the Grail. Okay, and I will very quickly go through this because again, it's more metaphors about the same thing. There is a medieval picture that shows this as the answer to what is the philosopher's stone, and different people, including Steiner, give different definitions to this. To me, the philosopher's stone is your ability to focus your consciousness on one area at a time in this etheric being. So you can move that stone up or down the etheric structure, and as you move it, you encounter the different worldviews, but you cannot awaken it until you have brought your lower self in marriage with the upper self, until the two beings that were divided when you fell out of paradise come together again and in communion again. This is what the picture shows to me, and where it points to is the seventh chakra in the image that I draw. And then, so from this, I went on to study what is this holy matrimony between the male and the female that it points to, right? And ancient drama talked about the Eros Gamos, the holy matrimony, and all comedy, all the way down to Shakespeare, ends with this marriage, happy marriage in the end, right? Why does that happen? Why is there that? I spent time trying to understand it, mostly through ancient Greek drama. But to me, the answer was that when you find your inner half, you have opened the kingdom of heaven. You're in heaven. But the trick is to figure out that you need to search within yourself rather than out in the world for that balance and happiness. So I show this schematically just to show how it aligns to at least my definition of the etheric. And then I show it with the 7 stars, the 7-pointed star, which has to do with evolution and the course of the week. The center here is the Virgin center. And if you think of this line that goes through that Virgin center, that is the line between Tuesday and Wednesday. And I believe that's where we are now. We are between the war of Mars in Tuesday, and the ascension offered by Mercury in Wednesday, because Tuesday is Mardi and Wednesday is Mercury. So I just played around with putting it in different ways. This is in the Merkabah, how it aligns. The center here is the Philosopher's Stone on the 7th. And the same here, and I show the 3 presences of Night Mason and Arc Mariner. We can go through these quickly because we've talked about them.